I check. Okay. So here we are. We're back for round 3, Freedom Friday. Thanks for joining us or watching this later. I got a couple questions this week. What are we doing? So I'm just going to give a brief intro. You can find out more about what we're doing by going to Facebook and looking for Freedom's Bees. That's our new page. It's brand new. It's just starting. You can also find us now on YouTube at the same name, Freedom's Bees. So why are we called Freedom's Bees? Well, because freedom needs workers. Freedom needs worker bees, and bees is a good analogy for that because in a beehive, everyone's equal. There's one queen, which we kind of think of as God, but then everybody else in the beehive is working for the common good of the hive, and everybody's working. They're not all working on the same things. But anyways, that's kind of why that's our mascot. And right now you can find us on YouTube and Facebook under Freedom's Bees. Now, it does help us get this started if people like it or follow it. Obviously, we can't go live on Facebook until we have at least 100 followers on there. And we're just getting started, right? So we only have 10 or 15, which is totally fine. But it does help when you take a minute and you go over there to Freedom's Bees and you follow us. We have 3 segments every week. I like to say it kind of the same way as we say in the Pledge of Allegiance. All of our segments are under God. We're not here to pretend in any way, shape, or form that the things we're talking about substitute or replace God, right? We are going someday to die. We will stand before God and be accountable for the actions and the things that we did with the talents that he gave us. So when I'm talking about wealth or stealth, or my dad is talking about his wisdom over 60 years of teaching people about health, he's not pretending he can prevent you from dying. What he's trying to get us all to do is to maximize our life, right? And that's the same thing with our other segments. When government grows too big, it hinders our life. So stealth is important. Free Americans have to be participants in their own governing. If we turn the government over to professional governors and we give them the responsibility to govern us, we limit our own freedom. And in doing so, we minimize the impact and the ability of ourselves and our children to live free. And we want to do that. We want to live free under God. We want to be healthy under God, and we want to grow our wealth and resources under God so we can be a cause for good in the world. So that's kind of the background. I appreciate all the help and support we've already got. We love the feedback. Thank you for chiming in and asking questions. It was so fun last week to see Clemencia, our exchange student from 15 years ago. She's in Colombia now, and she chimed in, and it just was awesome. So thank you for chiming in. We got a couple questions this week that came out last week, and I'm going to take a break between one of the segments, and we're going to ask those questions. But for right now, I'm just going to turn it over to my dad. And the last thing is you can see the previous Freedom Fridays. So the things my dad's talking about this week are building on things he talked about in week 1 and week 2. So go to the channel, go to the Facebook page. You can check those old, I don't even know, we're calling this a podcast, but it's not even a podcast yet. We're going to add Spotify later, but we haven't. So, but you can see the old episodes. So I'm going to let Gavin Tucker jump in here, and he's going to do the segment with my dad, his grandfather. mic'd up.
Well, good morning. Since we're building on what we talked about last week, I don't want to repeat things, but it's important that you have the background, because we'll refer to things like the paradigm or stress tolerance and that sort of stuff. But so the more you can follow up and begin to accumulate a little library you can refer to, because I'm going to refer to a couple of books we talked about last time. But I talked last time about ways you can maximize your health, orthomolecular, and the fact that each of us has a different potential and we should not compare ourselves. But the first principle we talked about last week is that our bodies are amazing creations, and it's only if we take care of them that will maximize our potential, and we'll be able to live a fuller life and accomplish the things God has asked us to do. But so we talked a little bit about the concept of visualizing yourself as a barrel. And a barrel has a capacity. And in this analogy, we'll just try and visualize the fact that your barrel is your ability to tolerate stress. When you're younger, you have a bigger barrel, and as we age, the barrel shrinks. And the rate it shrinks, it depends on how we take care of it. And then down the bottom, we have valves we can open and close. And when we open the valves, we reduce the volume of stress in our barrel. And it's only when our barrel gets full and we can't tolerate or cope with what we're trying to deal with that we get what we call dis-ease. So I'd like to spend a little time. If you have a bad habit of driving your car with your foot on the brake pedal, your gas mileage isn't going to be very good. And it's the same way with our body. If I and this is one of the things that's very stressful, is shift work. Your body is designed to operate on a circadian rhythm. And that means we should follow the sun as much as possible. Artificial light is stressful and it accelerates aging. Then we add the light that comes from computers and phone screens. This accelerates that problem. And so let's talk about ways we can relatively easily reduce the stress in our life, unnecessary stress. You don't want to get rid of all stress. There's a very interesting book called The Stress of Life by probably the father of this whole concept called stress, Hans Selye. And he wrote, there's distress, which accelerates aging, and there's eustress, which does a little bit of the opposite, but they're both stressful. We don't want to eliminate all stress. For example, one of the quickest ways to reduce bone density is go to bed. Bedridden people have very weak bones because our bones are designed to respond to certain types of stress. And when we eliminate that stress, bones tend to deteriorate. So we want good stress, but stress is an important part of life. So one of the first things I thought, as we try to get used to talking about these things, and you begin to realize that you can't rely on me as a doctor, and you shouldn't, and you can't rely just on the internet. You've got to do your own homework. You've got to educate yourself, and that usually means giving up screen time and unnecessary activities.
With screen time, you talked about artificial light. Is that more stressful to your mind, to your eyes, when you are looking at it at night?
Totally.
It is?
Totally.
Okay. Because I've noticed if I play like a video game or am on my phone during the day, usually there's not a big impact. on my eyes.
But,
Right.
but what we really need is the full spectrum of light, sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
And when we narrow
Right.
it down to what is emitted from the screen we're looking at, that's why there's some people that have designed a filter you can wear. It kind of looks like yellow, that blocks certain wavelengths which are harmful. But we're really designed to, and most of us don't get nearly enough sunlight.
Yeah.
And so, yes,
Why do you think it is that the sun makes us happy?
because of the full spectrum of light we get from the sun. It's like a nutrient. It's something that's really helpful. And when we don't get a lot of sunlight, then we have to compensate as much as possible. For people that live on the extremes of either the North Pole or the South, compensate by their diet. And that's the way God created the earth, is for need where we live.
Right.
And so when we talk about a wholesome diet, it should be a seasonal diet. At least the emphasis should be seasonal. In Oregon, we really don't need bananas and oranges to be healthy. Those are tropical fruits, and those are, we need more. But to make things easier for the dietitians, they try and doctors, just about every profession, they try and fit everybody into a category. And then we kind of call that cookbook medicine. And that's why the food pyramid was such a tragedy. It's designed to, they wanted everybody to follow it. And now we have an epidemic of chronic disease.
Wow.
What's the fruit in Oregon that is good for us?
Well,
generally?
I went out in the backyard today and I saw cherries,
Oh, okay.
Lambert cherries and Royal Land cherries, and the fig tree's getting ripe. See, so we should be getting away from grain and meat when we have more local produce available.
Mm. And okay, so apples grow good in the Northwest, so that's something good.
And plums,
Mhm.
but they're seasonal. They should not be a mainstay of our diet,
Yeah.
and that's one of the fallacies of vegetarianism.
Mhm.
It is not. Anyway, we won't get into that yet. But I'd like to just talk about some things that increase our need for these nutrients.
Keep going. Don't worry about time.
Well, I'm going to be concerned about it. Anyway. So if we can we had a graph last week I tried to show, but I think it turned out backwards or upside down or something. But it showed that as we increase our intake of all these essential nutrients, we become healthier until we reach a point where we're orthomolecular. In other words, we're getting all we need for our particular physiology, the way of what our body, and if it's a cold weather, we have different needs and different amounts. But as we increase the stress in our life, the amount of those nutrients increases also if we hope to achieve optimal health. So if we can reduce the stress, we can reduce the need for these certain nutrients, vitamin C, anyway. And so I'd like to talk just a bit about reducing stress. Okay, so what we really have to do is get rid of the stress in the food we choose. We have to quit eating highly processed, fortified. Someone once said, when I grew up, there was Wonder Bread had 12 nutrients in it. It's supposed to be wonder, all you really need. But what they do when they refine wheat, they remove most of the nutrients. And then they add a few back. It's like if someone takes $5 from you and gives you $1 back, you think you're enriched. And that's the fallacy of enriched foods.
Speaking of tax returns.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of the things that they add back, particularly in wheat and breads, is folic acid.
Uh-huh.
Have you heard anything about that? Because I've heard a lot from people that that's actually what causes wheat and gluten, allergies, intolerance.
Folic acid?
Folic acid.
No, that's not right. It's an essential nutrient.
It
And
is.
they've learned that, for example, this quote congenital or genetic disease called cleft palate is a folic acid deficiency in many cases.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But anyway, it's like people, I'm a big believer in orthomolecular amounts of iodine, which is about at least 1,000 times greater than the RDA. And everybody says, oh, I'm allergic to iodine. No, if you're allergic to iodine, you're dead. It's an essential nutrient. And what's happened, they've taken some sort of an injection, contrast X-rays and certain types of examinations use an iodine compound, but it's been compromised. Something's been added to the iodine to make it work as an X-ray contrast material, and they react to it. And so they say, well, I'm allergic to iodine. No. The first, when there is a iodine deficiency, cretinism is a big problem, and goiter. And those will kill you. And it damages the brain. But it's not the iodine.
Okay.
It's not the iodine. We need iodine, and we'll talk about that. And I hope someone has at least gotten a hold of that book about iodine we talked about last week. The iodine, I can't remember exactly what it was. But if you go back to and look at your notes, you'll find it. The iodine, well, I'll think of it.
It's kind of like with vaccines. The theory almost makes sense to me. Like, give someone a little chicken pox, and then their bodies will fight it and build it up an immunity.
Well, that's the theory, but unfortunately, they haven't found that virus, the chickenpox virus.
Oh, okay.
But anyway,
Yeah.
don't want to get up.
But then it's
Stay
like
on topic, fellas. Stay on topic.
Well, let's get back
That's
to
a
this
big can of worms.
idea of reducing stress. What can you do right now, starting today? What can you do? Well, the first thing you can probably do is gradually transition your diet. So you get rid of someone once said, when you go shopping, you should stay out of the aisles at the grocery store. Go around the outside, get produce and wholesome dairy products and wholesome. But if you go down the aisles, you're going to get in trouble because it's packaged food and it's been manipulated. Just for example, whole wheat has, we'll just say 100 parts of magnesium in it. When they make pastry flour, they've taken out about 85% of those magnesium parts.
Wow.
And so that's why magnesium deficiency is a huge problem. It's rarely addressed because you can't, and I doubt that most people listen to these. I guess almost everybody listening here has never had a magnesium evaluation.
No.
But anyway, let's not get off the topic.
And why would they take all those nutrients out of the flour?
Well, give me a what if you had to top your head, what would you have to say?
Maybe shelf
This
life.
might remind you of something.
Okay.
Okay, it's shelf life.
Shelf life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good, fun experiment. Put a piece of whole wheat bread out on the counter and a piece of enriched white bread, and which goes moldy. See, even mold can't live on white bread.
Not the McDonald's.
No, not the McDonald's.
We-
Okay.
I had a high school teacher who hung a hostess from his ceiling in his classroom, and it had been hanging there for years, and it never molded. It dried out, but it never decomposed.
That's
It
right.
just sat there as an
That's
artifact
because
to process.
The natural things in the universe that decompose things like it's supposed to. Well, what do you think you looked like if you were 200 years old?
Yeah,
Was it out of the package?
yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, but moving right along. Okay, what are some things we can start in right now? We can gradually shift our diet to more seasonal and try and get wholesome, and if you can afford it, organic food. The things they do to most food prolongs shelf life. One of the worst is spraying food with Roundup, but wholesome food, chemical-free food. Trying to get gradually learn what being seasonal food where you live, learn to focus on those foods. Then we have to clean up our internal environment. We've got to correct the damage that's been done from poor eating habits, medication, environmental toxins, dental materials. Great article, Orthomolecular News article recently is that most cancers are associated with root canals. So I'm not saying go get all your root canals out, but if one goes bad, don't have it replaced. Gradually improve that source of stress. Dental, and I doubt if anybody listening to this has had an antibiotic-free life, and that just destroys the microbiome in your gut, and that's the source of many neurotransmitters, and neurotransmitters translate into mental health. And so that's important. So our mouth and our intestine and our diet and then also our environment. We live in a very toxic environment. I'm always reminded when I talk about this of a patient I had once that she and her husband retired. They moved into a new energy efficient house. That just means they enclose all those chemicals, and how she got an autoimmune disease, and they didn't want to move out of the house, and she died.
They enclose all of what physical?
Well, what's in the paint? What's in the insulation? What's in the materials and the fabrics that they use to cover all the furniture? Plastics and polyesters and all these synthetic chemicals. And that's one of the bad things about house fires. All these chemicals kill people before the flames do.
Wow.
Yeah.
But an energy efficient house is one that's just
Airtight.
More airtight.
Airtight. Yeah.
And insulated. So it doesn't get the fresh air circulation. So you breathe the chemicals the house is made of nonstop. But your energy bill is lower.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off. You pay the doctor or the PG&E. Anyway, the other thing is, if you're looking for a place to live, don't get near a cell tower. Those are very toxic, and it's hard to get away from that nowadays because. But we could talk about something you can do to mitigate that. But anyway, we won't get into that now. So we've got to clean up our internal environment. We've got to clean up our external environment. Chloride, fluoride. It just goes on. Air freshener, cosmetics. If you go into a bathroom, and if you have two sinks, you see the female side and you see the male side. Which one has most chemicals on it? Well, all these cosmetics and wash your hair, bleach your hair, straighten your hair, all these things add to the toxic burden your body's trying to deal with. And it's using energy trying to deal with the toxins. You don't have the energy to protect yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have to work at improving our emotional environment. We've got to learn to take care of our mind, feed it properly, and here's another, low-fat diets poison your mind. Not directly, but you don't have the nutrients you need to keep your brain healthy. Where do you think the word fathead originated?
Fathead?
Fathead.
Mm.
It's the base of your brain, mainly fat.
Oh.
But you want to have good fats. And it's stay away from that pig fat. That's bad for you. Bacon, they've gone up and down. Bacon eggs are bad for you. Bacon eggs are good for you. They're good for you. They're natural. Crisco and these oil. If you read almost every website now is talking about seed oils. That's toxic.
Bad.
They're bad for us. So we need to work on improving our emotional health, our physical health, and the emotional health comes from getting yourself straight with God, praying, attending a church, helping the poor, and working on your relationship with your family. That's probably the most part. So what can you do? Okay, here's a few things you can start on right away. Consider taking a double lot capsule of salt once or twice a day. It's loaded with trace minerals, and that's where we get enough calcium, probably too much calcium. But it's a trace mineral, chlorine, not chlorine, but selenium, molybdenum, copper, all these things that are extracted from salt and the food we're eating. So a couple double lot capsules of Himalayan or red salt once or twice a day. Consider taking, until you've read the book, 1 or 2 drops of 2% Lugol solution, iodine. That's critically important, especially for women that have had any sort of breast disease. It's probably one of the major factors in the development of breast cancer. Iodized salt won't work. It's not nearly enough. Getting processed food and seed oils out of your diet. Eat slower. Improve your eating habits. Eat slower. Chew your foods well. Don't drink with your meals. Those are critical for a healthy digestion. I just had a daughter had her gallbladder removed because her digestive system wasn't working right, and then her gallbladder didn't work. It's a domino effect. Look at your bowel movements occasionally and learn what a healthy bowel movement looks like. No one talks about bowel movements. I'll bet 99% of the people here, if you go to a doctor and they check you over, he says, draw a picture of your bowel movement. What does it look like? What's the color? No one talks about that because it's not a pleasant thing. Okay, less screen time. Have a meal together with your family at least once a week. So many people report that they never eat with their family. And I can understand that. From working with large families, it's hard, but it's critically important. And those things we've talked about quickly here, oops, I'm way over my time, are ways that you can reduce your need for the essential nutrients. Well, I'm going to talk about exercise and sleep patterns. There's a whole lot, but you can start working on this just with these few things I've suggested here, and you will be than you would. Thanks.
No. Okay, well, good. So let's ask a couple quick questions while we still got you in the hot seat. So last week, somebody said on the thread, it was your nephew Jordan. He said, "Do you think cancer is natural, man-made, part of the plan?"
All of the above.
Tell us a little more about that off the cuff. What do you?
We're learning that all sorts of things can damage the immune system. Well, here's one good example. Since I'm kind of on iodine these days, one of the purposes of iodine is to allow the cells to go through this process called apoptosis. That's where a cell goes through a number of reproductive cycles and it dies like it's supposed to. Old cells don't work as well, like old bodies don't work as well as young bodies. And so eventually we're supposed to die. And so, and then you have the pollution. We have all the stress from pollution. We have all the chemicals, like I just mentioned a minute ago, that root canals is a source of chronic infection. You can never sterilize a root canal because you're putting a foreign body in living tissue, and the body's going to try and protect it. And then it's an acupuncture meridian, but it's all of the above.
Okay.
It's part of God's plan, but you look at some of these traditional cultures that most people live to 90 or 100, and if we get rid of some of the radiation from various sources. So I think it's all the above. If you don't have enough vitamin D, we've seen this especially recently. Vitamin D can reduce, if people have a vitamin D level of 70 or 80, the risk of cancer goes down about 75%. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And why are we vitamin D deficient? Because we've been told by doctors sun causes skin cancer. Well, sure, if you burn repeatedly, that's not healthy. And we stay out of the sun.
They
And
say,
we don't eat fat that's loaded with seed oils. Don't have vitamin D in it.
Mm.
Animal fats have vitamin D, and we've been told here again by the professionals that fat's bad for you. But it's just the opposite. There's a great book out called Eat Fat, Lose Fat.
Mm.
Anyway, so I think, Jordan, I think it's all the above. And everybody's a little different. And so if you're vitamin D deficient, vitamin C deficient, you're more likely to get cancer. But and if you live in a polluted environment and your body's full of lead and mercury and cadmium and aluminum, that's a huge problem. Thanks to the vaccine industry, that it's all of the above.
Yeah.
Part of God's plan. Our life here is limited, but there's better ways to die than cancer.
Well, okay. So back to Tucker's question that he was talking about a little bit earlier ago. So is folic acid that's put back into Wonder Bread the same as the folic acid that was taken out of the wheat?
What do you think?
Well, I'm asking you because
I
say folic acid is good, but he's saying folic acid could be causing some of the gluten problems in the world. But wondering is the gluten problem maybe being caused by the folic acid being removed from the wheat and then put back in there?
Well, I can't speak authority on this idea, but most added vitamins are synthetic.
Okay.
It's much cheaper to make a synthetic, and it's very similar. It's like there's a big problem 20, 30 years ago when they came out with, it's a very interesting story, but I don't have time to do it. Progesterone was a good example. Scientists found that progesterone is a very healthy, protective hormone. And so they said, well, it's not very stable and it's expensive to take it out of mistletoe. Essentially, the progesterone is a fertility drug, really. And it's in mistletoe. And that's why they hang mistletoe over and they start kissing.
Yeah.
So anyway, most synthetics are made because the company wants to put a patent on it. So no one else can make it. And so they make a chemical very similar to the original. And they found out that when they gave women synthetic progesterone, it caused cancer.
Mm.
Even though it had some similarities and alleviated some of the symptoms from that progesterone deficiency. So I would say, there may be some natural folic acid, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
that could be part of the theory that Tucker's hearing, is that the folic acid in the bread isn't the same as the folic acid or the nutrients that were there before they processed the wheat.
Probably,
Yeah.
if I had to bet on it, I would say it's synthetic.
Yeah. Interesting.
and if they're spraying all the crops in the United States with it, like all the wheat crops.
Well, it's not just wheat
So
anymore.
long.
It's
Yeah. Well, good. Okay. Well, good segment, guys. Thank you for being here. So, Dad, Jack, Dr. G, you want to step out for a minute and we'll switch to our next segment.
good.
I'll take over. I'll sit down in your chair for here a minute. We're going to
Good.
You're doing good.
Yeah. Okay.
Doing good. All right. Well, so we're going to transition here to this next segment. We're going to pick up like we did last week. I'm not trying to just plug the channel over and over, but I do want to point out, like, we do have the other episodes on the channel. So if you want to get some background on what we're talking about and you're driving to Portland or something, just plug it in and let's see where we're at. You can kind of follow along. So last week we talked a little bit about in the wealth, why we have this system that's set up to devalue our money. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that right now. greed is bad, just like a lot of other things. So you can create a great product, you can have a great idea, but if you turn greedy with it, you can cause a lot of damage. So a bank might be a great idea. It might improve the efficiency of the economy. It might make things a lot simpler to carry around a paper bill instead of hauling around silver or gold. There's a lot of benefits to currency, paper currency. But if the most powerful people in the system at the very top of the food chain there get greedy and start inflating the money so that every year you have 3% less in your account than what you started with, then that's what creates the problem. So you take this great idea and somebody with greed can turn it into a bad thing. So you got, and if you look at that, if you look at a chart of that over time, you can see how it's literally robbing our future. So you say the first generation's working hard, they're saving money for their kids, they're saving money for their grandkids, they're building their business, they're paying down their mortgage, whatever it is. And every single year, on top of taxes and other things, the banks themselves reduce the value of your savings 3%, just simply by inflating the money. Now, because it's been going on so long, it's been going on a whole lifetime, right? The oldest people now on the earth were not here when in the United States the Federal Reserve was created, which allowed the banks to start doing this. That was the first step in the process. So, but if you track that, if you track the value of $1 in the United States from 1913 at the time of the creation of the Federal Reserve to 2025, you'll see that they've literally taken all the value out of our money. Our dollars now are worth less than a penny was in 1913.
Imagine if there were penny stores.
Yeah.
And now it's a Dollar Tree. So.
Yeah, exactly. See that there was 5 and dime stores in the 50s. There was penny candy in the early 20th century. So again, this isn't about the local banker that's trying to help you get a savings account. That's not who the criminal here is. This is about the people at the very top who are willing to deflate your money every year, deflate the value by inflating the volume of the currency. Do we need a certain amount of currency? Absolutely. Do we need to always put more into the system so our money is deflated? Absolutely not. And you can see how whole generations of hardworking Americans have been robbed of the value of their savings by this process that's been going on now for 6 or 7 generations.
And actually, last week I was reading through part of the Constitution, and it says that states cannot make any type of currency that's not gold or silver.
Oh, cool.
And I don't know if that's still applied to the states, but the federal. But you said the Federal Reserve started printing money, just paper currency.
Yeah, and we could spend more time on that, which we're not going to get into too much more today because but I just want to introduce the idea, right? The idea is that there are greedy people, there are conspiring people that do not have your best interest in mind. When they're patenting progesterone and making it synthetic, and then that's causing problems for the people that are taking it, that's not with your best interest in mind. They're trying to, be it fame, be it power, be it money. These are 3 big things that motivate huge segments of the population against the common, hardworking, beautiful Americans throughout the all nations. I mean, there's beautiful people in all these nations. And unfortunately, there's this group at times, not all the time, but at times there's these groups that are working for their own benefit against the actual truth and values. So how do they get away with it? They get away with it with a lot of advertising. If you keep telling an idea over and over and over and over again, you can really convince a generation, right? We don't even have people anymore in America that remember a time when there wasn't a Federal Reserve. That whole group of American people that are our ancestors, our parents, our great-grandparents, they're now gone. So there's nobody in America anymore that actually has that collective knowledge of when there was a time when a central bank that acts independently of Congress, right? Congress gave the authority to the Federal Reserve to operate this thing. And a great book on this is the Creature of Jekyll Island. We're mentioning books today, so I'm gonna throw that one out there. The Creature of Jekyll Island it's interesting. The Federal Reserve, along with all of the government agencies that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, they weren't created rapidly. People had to work for years and years and years to get this idea into place. And so in order for us to give the responsibility to them, they advertised it and strategized and pushed this idea for years and years and years. And eventually they won. Their idea won, and now it's been so long that we don't even remember when that idea wasn't the idea.
And it makes me think, in Ecuador, where they use the American dollar now, and many other countries,
Right.
Which are sometimes places where you can't even start a business. Like when I was in Ecuador, you just see streetcars and little portable restaurants, right, along every street, and little tiny shops that people run out of the front room of their house. But they're using our same dollar that's losing value constantly. So we're not just robbing Americans; we're robbing anyone who's using the U.S. dollar.
Some people say it's a hidden tax, and it's true. So to that point, we have good friends in Nigeria, and they are running they're trying to grow their family business. And in Nigeria right now, at certain times or in the last few years, they've had inflation as high as 28%. Well, that makes it almost impossible for them to make progress. Okay, so going back, we're going to go ahead and transition now to the third segment because we're about out of time for today. It's a beautiful day up here in Oregon. There's a lot of amazing things going on today. There's this high school state championships going on at Hayward Field today. And I'm excited that we get to go over there and hang out at that historic venue. It's pretty cool. The Junction City team sent a lot of people down to there to compete against the best in the state. The Junction City softball team they advanced to the playoffs. They're in the round of 8 now, which is awesome.
That's why you're repping the JC.
I'm hoping for the upset tonight. The Junction City boys, they're hosting again tonight, and they're doing amazing. That's the baseball team. The Oregon baseball team is hosting in the College World Series playoffs, and the Oregon State team is hosting today. I mean, it's Oregon softball unfortunately lost last night, but it's kind of an amazing week right now in Eugene. There's a lot of teams that are still competing. But transitioning now, I want to reiterate, put this on when you're driving somewhere. Just listen to it. Let these ideas kind of ruminate in your mind. Think about them. back to the mascot of bees, we need a lot of people to understand what's really happening in order to have the mass needed to change what's going on. And so it takes a lot of people to turn the tide on cancer. It takes a lot of people to turn the tide on heart disease. 50% of Americans die of heart disease. It takes a lot of people to turn the tide. It took a lot of people to turn the tide to give the bankers the control over the currency. It's going to take a lot of people to turn the tide to take that responsibility back. And if you look at our podcast last week, we talk a lot about whose responsibility is it, right? So before there was ever a government, there was people. Were you going to say something?
Speaking of turning the tide, we talked a lot about the Federal Reserve. Is there something we can do to change that?
Absolutely. So here's the trick. If you give your money to the bank, they're going to pay you 1% or 2% interest for having a high yield. They call it a high yield savings account. And they actually advertise that. It's amazing to me that they actually feel comfortable advertising a high yield savings account when they're paying you in that savings account less than inflation. So you have to start taking responsibility for your money, not wasting it, and putting it into things that actually beat inflation, right?
But how could we lower inflation?
You can't yet. It's too big of a job. You need millions and millions of Americans to understand what's going on. That's one of the reasons people are doing podcasts about this, because we can't change it until millions and millions of Americans understand it's a problem and put their energy into effecting the change. If there's not a bunch of worker bees in the hive just dies, right? And I don't want America to die. I don't want freedom to die. But the reality that you can save freedom without a bunch of people participating, unless a bunch of people participate, you keep having this governing that's being done by very small groups of people. And that's not American. So you have to grow your groups. You have to grow the information. You have to get this information out to a lot of people that are 20 and 21 and 25. And people have to understand it in order to change it. With your money, just like with your health, you have to take responsibility. You can't trust the advertising at the bank. You can't say, oh, hey, high yield savings account, 0.75% a year. Like, don't believe it. That's not a high yield savings account. And so you gradually start to shift, right? So in construction, when we do a construction loan, the bank charges us between 12 and 18% to use the money to improve the property, right? Now you turn around and what do they pay me for leaving my money in their account? 2%. If I get a credit card, they charge me 25 to 35%. What do they pay me for putting my money in the high yield savings account? 1%. You see what's happening here? This is a little known fact that needs to get out there. In 2020, right when COVID was hitting, the banks changed the rules so they now have to have no reserve. This is shocking information if you know anything about reserves, right? The dollar started by having to be backed by gold, then they changed and it had to be backed by silver, then they changed and it didn't have to be backed by silver, but the banks had to have a certain percentage in their bank. They reduced that percentage over the years to where in 2020, I just looked it up the other day, the current requirement for a bank is 0 holdings. In other words, that means they can loan out all the money they have and it's multiplied. So keep that in mind, just more information. Okay, we're out of time here. We're going to end with we're just going to end. That's all we're going to do because we're out of time. But it's a good segment. Thanks for chiming in. Thanks for joining. Again, thank you for sharing and helping us to get this information out. We've talked a lot about the stealth. We've talked about the wealth. We talked about the health. Those are big keys for. But I do want to say one more thing about stealth. So the Declaration of Independence, it says governments were instituted among men to protect the unalienable rights that God gave us. That's a very important thing that America has to re-understand. The rights that we enjoy, liberties, the true liberties that we have, do not come from government. They come from God. Governments are created to protect those rights. The rights do not come from the government, although nowadays that's the general understanding, is that the government creates and grants the right. But the true order is that we understand where our rights come from, and we put these governments in place to protect them. And that's important to understand, because there was times throughout the world in all places where the government didn't exist yet, but people still did. People built roads, people policed themselves, people educated their children, people created currency and barter systems. All those things are part of human history, and all of those things happened hundreds and thousands and millions of times prior to the formation of government. Communities got together and paved roads. They built roads. I'm not saying government shouldn't build roads. I'm just saying everything that we attribute to government as a job, at one point in history, used to be a job that was done by humans, by individuals, by families, by communities. So you have to be willing to kind of shift the paradigm, like my dad said on episode 1. You have to kind of shift the paradigm and start re-envisioning what is the proper role of government and what is my responsibility as a human in the place that I live.
We think of the government and the president running America, right?
Right.
But originally, the government was established, like primarily for the purpose of defense, right? And
that was one of the
upholding the law in that country. So they weren't supposed to really direct a lot of stuff,
right.
except for the defense of the country. Like if people are invading, hey guys, let's go fight.
Yeah. So we don't necessarily have to shift all the way back to there, but you have to be willing to think about it. Like if there's 350 government agencies at the federal level, and there's 7 or 8 right here in Junction City, and there's another 22 in the county, all of those responsibilities at one point weren't government responsibilities. And so you have to kind of decide and be involved in a conversation about what's my responsibility as a human here, and what's the common responsibility that we're giving to the government. And it should be government and advertising that determines that question. It should be the participation of millions of Americans thinking about that.
And you think, why are there so many feminine men in our age? Because they're taking away all our responsibility. The government just like orders everything, right? And
well, not everything.
We don't really have a place to step up anymore.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that's what they will convince you of that if you let them. But okay. Anyways, we're done for today. Please go and like or subscribe on the channels we have up so far on YouTube, on Facebook, Freedom's Bees. And again, thank you for tuning in. We'll talk to you later.
Okay, number 2 is under our belt.
It is. Yep. There it is.
Well, we'll see what the polls show here.
Wait. What does it say?